So how we doing on the volume? That, I think that's it. Take it down just a half a scooch. Just take some of the boom out. I think, yeah, a little bit more, a little bit. Just a tad, just a tad. Where are you at now? Take a little bit out, please, Blake. There we go. You still hear it okay, Jim? You still hear it okay? Well, me too, but that's right there's good. Okay. Thank you, Blake. Sometimes the boom that comes back when it's set up too loud is not comfortable. Come on in. Okay. I get it taken care of. Well, from what I hear, Peggy's at home and doing much better day to day. So please keep her on the list. The Curtis family, of course. Anyone else we need to put on the list?
Felix is not feeling well this morning, so Richard's taking her to the minor emergency to see if, whatever it is.
Percy Felix. Did Scott park over at South or? All right, Seth, go ahead, please.
Dear Father, we're thankful for this morning you've given us, for the rain we've had. We needed it. Lord, we pray that we wouldn't get too much more. Lord, we pray that you would watch over us and bless us this week. Have a good week. Please bless us this morning. Help us to open our hearts to what you're trying to tell us through your word. Lord, we have a couple of requests we want to bring before you. We ask that you continue to be with Peggy for us. Thank you for the progress we've seen in her so far, Lord. We pray that you would continue to give her a good week. Father, we pray that you'd be with the Curtis family. Lord, we pray that you would help them grieve, give them encouragement and strength. Please lift them up, Father. God, we ask that you also be with Chris and Felix. Father, we pray that they would be able to find what's causing them not feel good, and pray that they'd get okay. Lord, we ask that you continue to bless them. In Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We're in chapter 52. And feel free to make a lot of notes because this is not going to go quick. But one thing I did want to do is start this section with a reminder, just kind of a step back, that this writing lies about midway in a timeline that represents about 1,400 years of a continuous culture. And I don't think we want to miss that, because when we start talking about comparisons and why things look like the same and language is used the same, that's why, because this is a long, continuous culture. And then my mind went off on a side note, so we're going to take a second to do that before we come back to it. And I don't know that it's important, it's just it was one of those things that just twisted my brain around a little bit. If we think about Israel, the promise of Israel begins with whom? Abraham. But the nation of Israel really begins where? With Joshua. That's where the nation of Israel begins, as a nation. Okay, they leave Egypt. Moses doesn't go into the promised land. Joshua takes them in there. Joshua's the one that sets up the priesthood and all of the safe cities. Joshua's the one that divides the land, follows through on some of the promises that Moses made sure all the families get their land, gives them instruction. That's where the nation itself, as a physical nation, really starts. So you got to wonder, why does Moses get all the credit and Joshua doesn't get any? Just something to think about.
The time that they spent in captivity also gave them time to develop as a nation, as a people, because they were
absolutely. Yes, sir.
I was just thinking that Joshua could have been the execution, but Moses was the conception.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where they draw that line.
Yeah. But by the same token, David was virtually all execution too, wasn't he? So it's just one of those things that hit me. I'm going, that's just kind of funny. But hey, it's part of God's plan, and I guess we'll find out down the road. But chapter 52 is clearly a prophecy of the church, and it's filled with comparisons. And so we're not going to rush through this. We're going to take some time, and we're going to go through this. Verse 1, for the third time we've seen it in about 20 verses. Awake, awake. Okay? And again, it's used twice. Being the third time that it's used twice, it's really trying to send a clear message out there. So it talks about the uncircumcised and the unclean. The uncircumcised are undoubtedly the Gentiles. The unclean, according to what I read, are probably the Turks, which I thought was kind of interesting. How does this apply to us, though? Again, I'm going to contend that 52 is a direct prophecy of the church. So we're going to tie a lot of this stuff into verses that I found in the New Testament that I think come right back to this. Go to Romans 2. When somebody gets there, read verse 28 and 29, please. Thank you. What's the stage being set there? This is a transition, isn't it? To be a Jew, you had to be physically circumcised. The transition that Paul's talking about is talking about circumcision of the heart, isn't it? And that comes through baptism. Correct. Okay. Go to Romans 14. And this was just one verse I found for each of these things that were in verse 1 and 52. Romans 14, 13 and 14. When somebody gets there, please read it. Okay. The last half of verse 1 is completely fulfilled in the New Testament. Where? It's a passage that's very familiar to us. Come on, Edward. Go to Acts 10. This is kind of a long passage, but I think it's worth reading. And I want you to don't just read along with me with, oh, I've read this 100 times. I want you to pick out the direct comparisons back to 52:1. Now there was a certain man at Caesarea named Cornelius, a centurion of what was called the Italian cohort, a devout man and one who feared God with all his household, and gave many alms to the Jewish people and prayed to God continually. About the 9th hour of the day, he clearly saw in a vision an angel of God who had just come into him and said to him, Cornelius. And fixing his gaze upon him and being much alarmed, he said, What is it, Lord? And he said to him, Your prayers and alms have ascended as a memorial before God. And now dispatch some men to Joppa and send for a man named Simon, who is also called Peter. He is staying with a certain tanner named Simon, whose house is by the sea. And when the angel who was speaking to him had departed, he summoned 2 of his servants and a devout soldier of those who were in constant attendance upon him. And after he explained everything to them, he sent them to Joppa. Okay, and then you kind of transfix over to another physical location. And on the next day, as they were on their way and approaching the city, Peter went up on a housetop about the 6th hour to pray. And he became hungry and was desiring to eat. But while they were making preparations, he fell into a trance. And he beheld the sky open, the sky opened up, and a certain object like a great sheet coming down, lowered by 4 corners to the ground. And there were in it all kinds of 4-footed animals and crawling creatures of the earth and the birds of the air. And a voice came to him, "Arise, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything unholy and unclean." And again a voice came to him a second time, "What God has cleansed, no longer consider unholy." And this happened 3 times, and immediately the object was taken up into the sky. Now, while Peter was greatly perplexed in mind as to what the vision which he had seen might be, okay, let me stop here for a second. This is a picture of food, which contradicts the Jewish food laws, the cleanly laws from all the way back to Leviticus, I think it is. Okay. Why would Peter be perplexed? He's being told he can eat anything now, because that's only half of what the message is that's here. Behold, the men who had been sent by Cornelius, having asked directions for Simon's house, appeared at the gate. And calling out, they were asking whether Simon, who was also called Peter, was staying there. And while Peter was reflecting on the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Behold, 3 men are looking for you. But arise, go downstairs and accompany them without misgivings, for I have sent them myself." Okay. So obviously that vision that Peter had more implication than Jewish food laws, didn't it? Yeah. And it ties all the way back here to this prophecy. Yes. Okay.
I don't know how you're taking that and putting it into the passages in the New Testament.
The way I connected it, and if I'm wrong, but the way I connected it was in Acts 10, God tells Peter, "What I have made clean, you will no longer call unclean." In Isaiah, they were called unclean. That's my connection.
I can see your connection that you're saying that because we've been cleansed by God, we are no longer considered unclean, so we are able to enter into Jerusalem, into the Holy of Holies,
Right.
into the temple. Which is interesting thinking about Cornelius. He wouldn't have been allowed in the synagogue.
Exactly.
What you're saying is that since everybody is now clean, everybody can come into Jerusalem, which is the antithesis of what the last of verse 1 says. Am I wrong? Tell me.
These people in Isaiah could not be made clean. They were unclean.
So who's being excluded from Jerusalem in verse 1?
According to the direct context, it would be the Gentiles and the Turks. Okay? My contention is in Acts 10, God says, don't exclude them. Give them the message. Give them the opportunity to salvation. Okay. That's my connection. Okay. Yeah, that's my connection. Because up to that time, Peter would not have gone to a Gentile, would not have gone to a Turk. He would have gone strictly to Jews. So, yeah.
The New Testament circumstances all are things that come to God.
Yeah.
No matter what circumstance.
Yeah.
I just don't see that in verse 1.
It's also interesting, Peter going into the home and business of the tanner, which dealt with unclean things.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, the
Yeah.
touching dead animal carcasses and such was
Yeah.
not something that was clean.
Chad?
I read a little different verse 1 and then New Testament verses. I focused on just what God has made.
Mm-hmm.
So where it says, wake up, clothe yourself with strength, O Zion, put on your beautiful clothes, O Jerusalem, holy city. For uncircumcised and unclean pagans will no longer invade you. Shake off the dirt, the dust after Jerusalem. It's a new beginning. They've been soiled, they've been defiled, they've been excluded from God. But this is a new day. Get up, put on your, I don't know, bridal robe. You've been made clean. You haven't cleaned yourself.
No. No.
That's kind of the line I was following, whereas in Acts we're seeing what God has made clean. Don't call it clean.
I think there were just semantics, but
Yeah.
yes, sir.
I may not have heard, well, I did not hear every single word that you said, so I may have missed something important. But in Acts 10, verse 34, so Peter opened his mouth and said, truly I say that God shows no partiality. And then verse 35, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him.
Yeah.
Which I think clarifies what Peter was being taught by the Holy Spirit in recognition of the fact that, yes, the Gentiles are in fact acceptable to God, especially to receive the gospel and obey.
Yeah.
I still don't see the connection to verse 1.
Yeah.
I understand what Clayton's saying is completely correct. What you're saying is completely correct as it relates to Acts and the Romans, but not to Isaiah. I just don't see it tied personally.
And it may be a stretch.
Well,
But-
is chapter 52 in Isaiah, is that a prophecy of something to come? Or is that here, present, and now in 720 BC?
Probably both.
I think, though, it is them coming back into Jerusalem. If you follow the train in the book, he's prophesying they're going to return. And what he's saying is that I'm going to purify Jerusalem, and only the circumcised and clean are going to come into Jerusalem. I think this is them coming out of captivity back, and it has nothing to do with the New Testament. That's my personal read on it.
Well, the only reason I
If I
ask
don't
is,
know any in here that says that.
yeah,
I mean,
no,
I will be glad to shut up
no.
if I'm the only one.
Well, the only reason I ask is because if you continue reading in Isaiah 52, it seems to give a prophetic language in that this is the Lord's coming salvation. It's yet to come. It's yet to happen.
Well, certainly, reading on into 53, you would agree with that, okay? And I would too. I just, in the context of 52 verse 1, I don't see it.
Understood.
Okay.
Also, does anybody have a Bible that has a cross-reference to this?
Yeah, the only cross-reference here is to Revelation.
Yeah, that's one thing. And secondly, a lot of times when there's a passage that is being referred to the Old Testament into the New Testament, it actually quotes it. I don't see that here either. I kind of agree with Chad. To me, when I read this, it's more like Jerusalem is the bride who is getting ready for her beloved. Because that's the way I read it. It's like, get prepared, your beloved is returning, and you're make yourself beautiful and pure for your day of redemption, your wedding day. That's the imagery I get when I read this. Put on your beautiful garments. That to me is like, be ready for your bride.
I agree.
It's particularly difficult because sometimes it's just talking about the return of the Jews to Jerusalem. And sometimes it's talking about the coming of Jesus. And so you got a 500-year gap there. And which is he talking about? In context, it's the return to Jerusalem.
as we get into 52, I think that that's exactly what happens as we get further into it. I think the middle of the chapter, now, I've said it before. I think Isaiah typically addresses the Jews at the time with that which they can understand, no question. But I think as we get into the chapter, we're going to see that this is also very prophetic. Yes, sir.
I saw a difference between the two, in the Isaiah verses are about restoring a relationship, whereas Acts 10 is more about like the birth of a relationship. But the consistent thing I saw between the two was that God was making what God is making. In Isaiah, the bride didn't make herself clean. He's decided, hey, your time of shame is over now. Get cleaned up. We're gonna start over. And whereas in Acts, he's having to tell Peter, what I've made clean, don't call it unclean. I'm doing a new additional work in the Gentiles through Jesus. I'm bringing them on. It's a birth for them more probably than a restoration.
But Acts 52:1 doesn't say everybody's circumcised and clean, therefore everybody gets to come to Jerusalem. That's exactly the opposite of what it actually says.
In Isaiah, when he's talking about the unclean pagans, it's not about. That's what I'm saying. It's restoring the relationship with Israel, not nothing to do with the pagans. He was using the pagans to punish her.
No, I think he's purifying Jerusalem. He's throwing the unclean and the uncircumcised out. He's keeping them out.
Certainly protecting her from them.
That's just the direct reading of the verse. I'm a direct reading guy, you know.
But she was sold into bondage, she was a slave, she was defiled.
Mm-hmm.
He's ending that. It's like,
Yeah, I agree. I think he's looking at the return of the Jews to Jerusalem.
but it's a restoration.
Right.
Told you we wouldn't.
Acts is a birth. It's a beginning.
I don't disagree with you. I just think that I saw an extension of it.
When I looked at in Isaiah 52, it's talking about this year, you can't let the uncircumcised come in. It's still something that the Israelites had to do, not allow the uncircumcised to come in. In Acts, Jesus is saying, they're not unclean anymore. You know, and he's saying, you can go to them, but you're not unclean. So in one situation, there's still an act that has to do, and as we know from the history of the Israelites from this point forward, they still let uncircumcised people in and still go to the temple.
Okay.
You know, and so I think in some ways they still didn't do what God asked them to do. You know, but in Acts, he's saying, I'm declaring this. This is still an instruction. Don't allow me in because it's still something they had to do, which is another kind of a contrast between the Old Testament and New Testament, the physical and spiritual. You know, and so again, to me, this is talking about something from Jerusalem,
Go.
where Acts is talking about something totally different.
All right, let me see if I can clarify some of the reasons for my connections. Were the Edomites ever allowed to interact with the Jews in this time frame, actually a little bit before this? Haven't we already studied that that the Jews were told to leave the Edomites, just separate yourself from them. Do not have anything to do with them. And what about the Jewish half-breeds? Yeah, the Sumerians. What were the Jews told with the Sumerians? Don't have any dealings with them. Stay away from them. Okay, so up till Acts 10, would the apostles have dealt with Sumerians, or would they have dealt with Edomites or any of those groups? No. After Acts 10, God, let me take one more sidestep. We have the opportunity. Are we clean prior to baptism? No. But baptism is there so that Edomites and Samaritans and us can all be made clean. I think that's kind of the passage or the,
I agree with everything you're saying, I just don't see it tied to
yeah.
52 verse 1.
I have to step you back to Acts 1,
Mm-hmm.
where Jesus tells them, "You will be my witnesses to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and all the world."
Which I always thought was interesting.
That's where they were told to take the gospel to the unclean too, but they still didn't do it. And that's why the persecution came in with Saul to scatter the churches. They then took the
Yeah.
gospel at that point, but they were still dealing with that because they brought Paul in saying, "What are you doing?" And
No.
Peter's like, "He's doing what's right." So they should have started in Acts chapter 2 when they gave the gospel. When they got when Pentecost happened, they should have done it then. And they were actually, because they all the nations there heard the gospel in their own language.
But following the captivity in Babylon, there would have been Jews in every single one of those countries. And that's the argument I've heard, is that they were instructed to go to Samaria to teach the Jews that were in Samaria, not the Samaritans. That's an argument I heard. Whether it's valid or not, I don't know. Yes, sir. Oh, do you have your hand up? What about John 21?
When Jesus asked Peter, "Did he love him 3 times?" And he was instructing him on what he needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Feed the sheep. But he told him there were other sheep that was not of his fold that I would bring into the fold.
Yeah.
And that was before Peter went to the rooftop and had that vision.
Yeah.
But at that point, when they went to Cornelius, was when the Gentiles added to it.
Yep. Which is why I started this off with a reminder that we're in the middle, right here, we're in the middle of 1,400 years of a continuous culture that was biased and bigoted against other groups at God's direction for their purity. Okay, so, and that's the reason why I draw the connections, is because we see that, in my mind anyway, we see God instructing them, put that away. I've changed that. That's kind of how I read it. Okay. Verse 2. Is shake yourself from the dust and arise and sit. And it is, I don't want to lose the context. This is the follow through from verse 1. The dust represents Israel under the multiple oppressors and the degradation that they went through. The loose yourselves is a follow-up of this being released from oppression and captivity, and certainly would have been encouraging to them. Consider again their physical state under the constant threat of the Assyrians. Okay, and I don't think we should forget that this is written in the midst of that. Meyer's commentary. Okay, let me read verse 2, and then I'm going to read this. Shake yourselves from the dust, rise up, O captive Jerusalem, loose yourself from the chains around your neck, O captive daughter of Zion. Myers brought up an interesting point. He said this is a rare construction. Whoops, wait a minute. Maybe I'm going too far on this. Oh, he's got the references here. I may have my notes out of order. Okay. Or I lost a note on here. Yeah, that's what it is. I lost a note. Because what I thought about with the dust, where do we see the dust in the New Testament? What did Paul do? Yeah. Yeah. And the generalized context is the same. Israel's being told to shake that dust of oppression and degradation off of themselves. And in the New Testament, Paul is being told to shake the dust to get rid of that impurity, that garbage, get it away from them. so that they could continue the way they were supposed to go. And unfortunately, I did not do a good job of putting all my notes together, so I don't remember all the context of why I copied Meyer's notes out of here. So we're going to pass it up. There is. Yeah.
Job literally reduced to just sitting around in the dirt, scraping his sword. Their time of shame and humility is over or coming to an end.
Yeah.
Just tell them basically, wake up, get up.
Yeah. The contradictory term arise and sit is where we're going to go here in a second.
Going further what Chad says, I mean, the idea of mourning is, putting dust, sprinkling dust on your head and your clothes. Saying, shake this mourning dust off. You no longer need to be in mourning and shame.
Yeah, yeah, and mourning was part of what I read about in terms of that dust. Yeah, basically a low state that they were in as a result of their sin and their idolatry and God's punishment. Although it appears to be contradictory to arise and sit, in this culture, the privileged would have carpets on their floor and would have these low-lying sofas that would get them up off the ground. And so what's actually being said here is Israel, get up out of your dirt, shake it off, and go sit where you belong in this privileged place. Privileged to God, upon the sofa. Isn't that us, though, too? Don't we have a privileged place in God's house through our submission? Excellent analogy. Excellent analogy, yeah. 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 He always said that to the Jews. It was the Jews that turned their back on it, just like our children are disobedient to us. They're still our children. Yeah. And it's the church now. We are God's. If we can understand and remember that, at least my looking, what I see, is the parallel structure between God and the church and a family. There's an incredible parallel in my mind anyway. And being able to see that in our family, I think, helps us understand our relationship with God better. Yeah.
I see this more, the sitting and the arising is more about bondage and slavehood.
Mm-hmm. Getting out of it, yeah.
The bound slave with the chain around their neck, they were either in submission, bowing down, or standing and serving. But now you're saying, take off your yoke of slavehood and sit down. You're going to be served, and you're going to be seated in the place of honor, and you will be served. That's why I say, be seated, loose the chain of oppression or the chain around their neck. So they are being freed from captivity, being freed from slavehood. They're being granted daughterhood, a bride.
Yeah.
So they're being released.
Just like us when we're baptized, huh?
Also thinking about this idea of the bride, you got the kinsman redeemer, which we don't really understand. And that's kind of, I can see that thinking about the culture that the Lord is being the kinsman redeemer for Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And restoring her, restoring the people of Israel.
Yeah. And let's not lose context. This is a follow-up from chapters that we've already studied where God has explained why he has been justified in punishing them and why they will go into captivity. And this is the glorious coming out and the glorious regaining of that privileged position with God.
Think about my own father. When I was little, didn't want them influencing me, or he was protecting me from them. Whereas in the New Testament, it's where my relationship today with my Father is different. The fear is gone. It's replaced with more love and respect. I would do things to honor him, not because I feared him. And he's not training me so much and providing for me um, physically, right? But he still gives me wisdom and understanding and training. But our relationship is just totally different. It's more the love placing the fear, and instead of me just obeying his orders, I'm getting the benefit and understanding more the wisdom of what I've been taught my whole life. Um, our New Testament relationship with God is more in that vein. It's not about just training little children so much as the fear goes away and it's replaced with love. We become more like Christ because we've gone to him, because we're loving him back because he loved us first. It's a different role altogether. And that's kind of why it's a little bit hard to draw the direct parallel sometimes where between the Old and the New Testament. I think God's responsibilities were a little different in the Old Testament because before he could have a people of his own, he had to train them and create them and draw them out and build their laws and their culture and everything. We had to establish what is right, what is wrong. You can't exactly appreciate grace and mercy until you know what your liabilities are, that you are lost, that you have sinned, that you are dirty. Well, how do I know what sin is? How do I know what's dirty and what's clean and all? So the Old Testament in a lot of ways represents our childhood, where we have to just understand the most basic principles, so that in the New Testament we have the adult relationship where we can appreciate the gifts and the benefits of what all God is and what he's done for us. That kind of stuff.
I agree with you completely, but let me be the devil's advocate here for a second. Yeah. Mhm.
True, but God is a
Yeah.
good Father.
Absolutely, absolutely. But let me be the devil's advocate here for a second. Is the God of the Old Testament the God of the New Testament? Okay. And I don't question that our covenant is different. Okay? Our covenant is different. But if the God of the Old Testament is the same as the God of the New Testament, and Solomon says to fear God is the beginning of wisdom for the God of the Old Testament, and I've heard all my life the same things, but is it really right for us to forget that we should also have a measure of fear? I mean, we see in the New Testament where we're told, don't fear that can take your life. Fear that which can take your soul. Is it? Maybe a measure, maybe a voluminous difference, but is it a different kind of fear? Oh, probably a bunch. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Exactly. That's right.
And on our own, we ain't winning. I mean, there's nothing we can do. We're not good enough. And I think it always comes in that context. Don't leave him. Don't be outside of him.
Mm-hmm.
That, that's when you fear him. So, yes, there's that reverence. Yes, it's remembering who's holy, I'm not, and all those things. And yes, it's the same God, but the old covenant dealt a lot with the physical, but not just the physical. And you see that new covenant bringing in the spiritual, side of each of those things. So, um, I think it's, and I also think it's just hard to wrap our human mind around.
Oh, no doubt.
So there's some things we just have to say, your ways are higher than my ways, I get it to a point, but I'm really not sure. But I do think we're not supposed to, we're not called to walk around fearful. Oh my goodness, I don't know what's going to happen.
Agreed.
Oh my goodness, am I good enough? Because you know what, I'm never good enough. But I don't have to fear that because I'm covered in Jesus' blood. And I do think there's a piece about the old covenant too, that they stay faithful. He wasn't calling them to perfection, although there's that reminder of sin in his
Mm-hmm.
and Paul explains how that old covenant helps healing them, the whole picture of everything, understanding things more. But he was still providing how they could be okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
No,
answered that question a bit, or just, but I mean, it is, it is, I mean, a lot of what Chad said and what I could hear, there is that difference in relationship because we're under the new covenant and how much God has done for us and how much love and gratitude that brings.
what is really the difference in our relationship versus the Jewish relationship? What is really the difference in that relationship?
It's a Jewish relationship that really was fear. Well,
I don't know, Bert. I don't know.
I mean, they had to follow the law
Mm-hmm.
to the letter. That if they didn't, it was death and destruction. Now, fear is still part of the formula, but now there's a lot more respect and love. Kind of what Chad was saying is that we as the church, back in the Old Testament, God was protecting us from the influence of others. Now he's saying that we are mature enough as Christians to go out, and now we are to influence those people that we used to have to avoid because we have matured.
I would challenge y'all to find where the Jews were told to live in fear. That's the first thing. Because I don't think that's anything different than we are now. And I would contend that the primary difference between God and the Jews and God and the church is Christ.
To me, the difference is back in the Old Testament, your relationship with God for particularly keeping the law. You couldn't do it perfectly what sacrifices were for.
Thank you. Now you're heading in the right direction.
In the New Testament, because of what Jesus has done for us.
Yeah.
And that's the difference in us accepting that, but still, it's a, it's what Jesus has done for us, and because Jesus lived a perfect life and was a perfect sacrifice, if we accept that sacrifice, then we have a relationship with God. It wasn't something that by us having to keep the law on a day-to-day basis. So to me, that's the difference in the Do children fear their parents?
They better,
Why?
because it's the beginning of wisdom. Depends on how you define fear.
Okay, right, because are they afraid that they're going to mess up? And they have so much fear of themselves that they're going to mess up?
He was afraid because he got caught. Yeah. And that's my contention, is I don't believe you're going to find where the Jews were told to live in fear. The Jews were told to follow God. And it's the same thing we are. We're told to follow God.
We are told to work out our salvation in fear and trembling.
Yeah. Yeah. And that fear just, but all of those things come back to it's the same God in the Old Testament, same God in the New Testament. So it's
Maybe in the Old Testament they feared God because they didn't understand him. Because Christ came down and died for us, we understand God better.
I don't know. They saw the Red Sea parted. They saw Samson bring down an entire building. They saw all of these things. I don't know that they didn't understand.
They heard God's voice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He told that he talked to them.
Yeah.
they were afraid. Now, I don't know that God intended it that way, but all that was destruction, which causes fear.
But
Setting your son down is not destruction. That is showing love.
don't forget Revelation. And that's post-Christ. Okay? David, we could be here all day. Would you close? I don't want to get into Edward's time too much. Maybe half of it.
Father in heaven, we come before you now, people wanting to know what your word says. For we know there is wisdom in your word, that there is growth in your word, and that there is happiness in your word. But we truly do not want to be an ignorant people, but we want to know what you want from us. Father, this is the reason that we ask for wisdom, because you will always grant wisdom to those who sincerely ask for it. Father, I pray that you continue to bless this congregation. You bless the congregation here to be the light that it is meant to be. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all very much.